In this third part, we're going to get into something that might be referred to as a type of magic. Photography, um, when it works right, can be so much more than just a piece of paper with some ink on it. So I want to introduce these three grounds to you. If you look at a landscape picture of Sedona, you might see some trees, which we are close to the camera, and we're going to call those the foreground objects. And then behind the trees, there might be a little bit of a stream or a river or a waterfall, and that's going to be what we call the middle ground of the picture. And then behind that are the canyon walls, the big red rocks that are rising up to meet the sky. And that's the furthest thing away from the camera, and that's the background. So the magic that I'm talking about here is a transformation. And just like in the old days, you had alchemists who were trying to take lead and turn it into gold. Well, visual artists are kind of bound to work with a flat format. A painter has a flat canvas. Somebody who's drawing a picture has a flat piece of paper. And a photograph turns itself into a flat print. But pictures don't have to look two-dimensional. They can resemble something that has depth, and we call that the illusion of three-dimensionality. Now, there are different ways to create the illusion of depth. Framing, converging lines, wraparound lighting, or side lighting would be three of them. I think that you'll agree that the dark foreground silhouettes, the two people with umbrellas, the hanging leaves at the top, those are the things that are closest to the camera, and they create a frame that we look to find the main center of interest. And the main center of interest is the bride and the groom trying to get through this rainy courtyard towards the buildings in the background. So framing is when you try and include something around the edges, and then you put the main object further into the picture, and you've built a frame around it. Converging lines has to do with how the human eye processes the information that it sees. If we got into a hot air balloon and we got 50 feet or 75 feet or 100 feet up in the air, and we look down at this street, we would think to ourselves that the edges of the street are parallel. They don't come together. But as we lower the balloon down and finally we climb out of the balloon, we're on that street, and we look down the street, and the edges of those lines get closer and closer together until you find what people who draw call a vanishing point. Our last kind of lighting is wraparound or indirect light. This is the type of picture that when you see it in an art gallery, you feel like you could almost reach into the picture and wrap your hands around the object and feel mass and volume. This is a famous shot, by the way, from Edward Weston, and it's called Green Peppers. And when he writes about it in his day books, he says it's a pepper, but it's actually a lot more than a pepper. So it has two different meanings, or three different meanings. Now, Leonardo da Vinci, you'll remember him from about 1500, very famous painter. He called this the perspective of disappearance. Today we call it atmospheric perspective. And when you have a climate that is humid, so here you're in Michigan, or here you're New Hampshire, or here you're someplace back east, there's humidity in the air, and what that humidity does, that water vapor in the air, it starts to filter out the color and the value. And the further back the objects are, the fainter and less colorful they are. So when you look at a picture like this, it's almost like you're standing on the Blue Ridge Parkway and you're looking out over the mountains, and you're seeing range after range of mountains, and they appear to be going further and further away because they are getting fainter and the detail is being washed out the further back